Most principals think learning requires more time. But what if you could deliver half a semester, half a term's worth of learning in a single hour? Today's guest, Simon Strong, did just that with a topic students fear and many teachers avoid: physics. By partnering with the Institute of Physics and leveraging cutting-edge neuroscience, Simon and his team designed a video-based learning experience that helps students retain complex material without the usual overload. It's not about replacing teachers with tech. It's about removing the cognitive noise, simplifying delivery, and sequencing content in a way that Simon calls it tattooing your brain and having that foundational knowledge stuck in your long-term memory. In a world of distractions and disengagement, this episode might just rewire how you think about teaching, memory, and the future of education. I'm Danny, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional setting, so that you create a campus experience worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus Makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million podcasts worldwide. Today, my guest is Simon Strong. He's involved with Download Learning, I believe a co-founder, where they're proving the 1 hour of well-designed instruction can outperform weeks of traditional classroom learning. And you'll also find that if you combine Simon's approach to learning with traditional instruction, you could actually double your gains. So you'll hear about that in the episode as well. So once again, thanks for listening, and we'll be right back after a quick message from our show sponsors. Want to know how top schools create collaborative learning environments that actually work? ODP Business Solutions has equipped innovative educators for over 3 decades. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's make a ruckus together. That's odpbusiness.com/education. This episode of Better Leaders, Better Schools is sponsored by Play Piper. Every student starts with curiosity. Piper keeps it alive. Our hands-on STEM kits turn gaming passion into real engineering skills. Spark confidence in your students at playpiper.com. Go over and visit playpiper.com today. Hell's ready-made lesson plans are aligned to your textbooks and state standards, so teachers can turn to IXL for the exact content they need to help their students. You can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right. And Simon, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Right on. And so we got connected, I think, through LinkedIn, and I was posting how Bill Gates mentioned something very provocative. All teachers will basically be replaced by AI. Most people just read the headline, and then they tell me I'm a big jerk, and they didn't read the entire article, which said why Bill might be a little bit right, and then also why he's wrong. So that just shows people's reading comprehension. But the best part was that I met a lot of new people, because that post blew up for me, and a lot of folks I wasn't connected to prior, right, put some really thoughtful comments. You were one of those people, and you said something that we're going to get into that was shocking in terms of like a half term of academic gains happening in an hour. So that's where we're building this conversation toward. But I think where I want to start is just, you're based in the UK, and something that you said that was quite alarming and that kind of thing was just the huge shortage of teachers, and specifically physics teachers, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so there's in the UK, there's in England specifically, there's a shortage of something like 3,500 physics teachers, which means something like 50% of all schools have a shortage in the physics department. And I don't know how it is in the States, but the natural inclination of a head teacher is to say, the chemistry or biology teacher, can you step in and cover physics? Because, it's another science. And that puts a huge amount of stress and strain on the academic staff, on the faculty. And it's not great for students either.
Yeah. Yeah. And to translate for the Ruckus Maker listening, in case they're based in the US, head teacher, that's you. That's a principal across the pond. And so I'll be doing the code switching, I think, in the.
And look, the translation for me.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
So you built a solution, that's doing remarkable, creating remarkable results. But you tackled physics, you tackled a difficult subject first. Like why not do something easier?
I guess partly masochism. We have whenever we've done work in the corporate sector, the natural inclination is for a client to say, let's take something easy. And the problem with that is you do something easy and the intuitive response is, well, will it work for something harder? We've always gone to our clients and said, give us the hardest problem you have, because if we do that, then everything else is easy. And that was the approach that we took. So we partnered up with the Institute of Physics, which is like one of the bodies in the UK. They're the body for physics, both teachers and professionals. And they were concerned with this shortage of teachers and how do you support students in their academic endeavors when there's such a shortage. And we said to them, well, give us the hardest topic, which they said was atomic structure and radiation. It's a topic where more students have misconceptions going into their exams than any others. So if we could crack that, they felt that was a good start point. Yeah.
And I think your solution leans into video in terms of how it delivers. Is that correct too? Can you describe it a bit?
Yeah. So we create a video very simply, but what it does is sequences information to trigger long-term memory. Teachers will know you're sitting there in a class talking to your students and they'll nod along. And at the end of it, you'll ask the students what they learned and they'll just look at you blankly. And that's not because they are foolish or stupid or willful. It's because that's the way memory works. Most of the time, we've got stimulus coming into us and our short-term memory gets rid of it really quickly. So as I'm speaking now, synapses are firing, creating meaning, but most of what I'm saying will be forgotten. And it's also taking all the information from around us, the feeling of the chair on if you're sitting down, on your body, or the light and sounds that are going on, the air conditioning, hopefully at your end, or not, because we're in the UK, and so I'm boiling here. And so that's all going on, and students have got that, with a kid next to them peeing their nose, or the girl that they fancy, or the teacher who's got that weird mannerism or weird accent as I've got. And they have to sort through all of that. So what we do is simplify it down into a really clean learning signal and strip out all of the extraneous information. But then what we do is we time sequence it to fire synapses in a distinct time sequence, which triggers the chemical process to strengthen those neural connections. So what we're able to do is take a large amount of information and present it in one learning burst, in 1 hour-long video, and that will stick. And that will be retained by the student in their long-term memory.
And I think you called it tattooing the brain as well. Is that true?
Yeah. So the original neuroscience was done by a guy called Douglas Fields, an American. And in his paper, that's how he described it. He said, in effect, you can tattoo information into the brain. I think that's probably a little bit of a stretch, but I think he gets the point across. And it's not a perfect... it's not like you're a tape recorder and we're doing reel-to-reel transfer. But what it's really useful for is any topic that is novel. So as you're entering a novel domain of information, it's a really powerful way to present schema, because we know that memory hooks onto memory. And if the students don't have that foundational knowledge, they can't build on it.
Right.
So these bursts of information that we're able to provide tattoo in that schema into the student's brain. And what we found, and the paper that I linked you to, was a study by University College London by Professor Tolney, who was the chair of psychology and human development. And he did it across 5 non-selective state schools. So you'll have to translate that to the American audience, but it means it's not private schools.
It's not the most resourced, most privileged schools. These are regular schools and maybe facing pretty tough scenarios.
600 students, and the control group had a standard half term of classroom learning, having the physics lessons presented as they would normally. And the control group we took was the first group that we conduct an experiment on were the year below, because you can't experiment on students who are revising for exams for the exams at GCSE, which is age 16 in the UK. And they had an hour-long video, and they achieved approximately the same learning outcomes as students who'd had a full half term of classroom learning. We then had another group who had our package and then had the rest of the half term with standard classroom learning. And those students doubled their attainment. And that's really where the power of this comes in, which is not to replace teachers, but if we know that, every year in every classroom, teachers are teaching the same topic. And one thing we know about people is we're not really very good at doing repetitive tasks. Doing the same thing over and over, we don't like that. We don't enjoy it. We like variation. We like creativity. But what is good at that is technology. So what we've done is essentially take that repetitive task and digitize it. And that liberates teachers from the monotony, the drudgery of the curriculum, and frees them up to explore it with the students and go into it in greater depth, rather than being driven to try and drill that stuff into the students' heads.
Well, going back to the tattoos on the brain, concept again, it's so powerful, and you don't have to reveal anything sort of proprietary. But if you're able to answer this question, like you mentioned linking learning, back to other learning and building upon schema. So I think our listeners will understand that. But I don't know that I understand perfectly yet. Like, why is that sequencing, or how might a teacher approach this too? Like, I'd like to learn more about the sequencing and why that works so well.
I mean, if you imagine that when you go to the gym, you don't just lift one set of weights and come out built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have to do repetitions, and the same is true of memory. And it just so happens that there is a natural process in the brain, which is when you fire those synapses and allow them to reset, fire them a second time, and then fire them a third time. That 3 times, this is important information, you need to retain it. And you can optimize for it by the gaps in between that allow the brain to rest. And for those, and specifically the long-term memory synapses, it needs roughly between 9 to 11 minutes of rest period where the brain isn't thinking about that topic. So that's the secret sauce, as it were, is that time sequencing to enable the brain to recognize that the stimulus being presented to it is important. And that's a natural process. The other thing that we do, which is very important, is to break information up into what we call modes. So as a teacher, you'll recognize that you present information in 3 modes, often one-off or a variation. We tend to flip between them, which is direct instruction, explaining what you want students to do, what the topic is. We give them examples, worked examples, case study stories of that information being used. And we use active recall, where we ask them questions, or we ask them to reflect on, or we give them an activity in which we want them to apply that information themselves. And often we'll flip between each of those modes interchangeably. And one of the problems with that is, as you'll know from your own concentration, is if I ask you, if you're immersed in an activity and the phone goes and you pick up the phone, it takes about 15 minutes for you to refocus on the activity that you were originally engaged with. But we're doing that to students every minute or two in the classroom, flipping between each of these different modes. And that is just overwhelming for them. There's no wonder that they can't grasp what you're trying to get across. And it's a problem with mastery, which is we know the topic so well, we're happy to flip between it. And that's really useful when students have a grasp of it, when they've got a scheme, they've got an understanding of the topic, flipping between it enriches it. But to get that foundational knowledge, that's a problem. It confuses them.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, at times we're almost shooting ourselves in the foot or causing problems within the classroom by switching the attention of our students. Because you're citing that study. I used to talk about that in relation to multitasking, right? And you switch tasks, whatever, and you think you're a great multitasker, but it's all BS. Because like what the research shows is that it takes at least that 15 minutes to get back. And that's only switching tasks that one time, right? Now multiply that exponentially throughout the day. And you've wasted and become far less productive, right? In the context of classrooms, right? Students aren't getting that foundational knowledge, so there's nothing to build on. So I'd love to ask you, I mean, well, go ahead. It looks like you
Well, I was going to say that, the physics teachers, I've got some bad news. It gets even worse because for most topics, and most of our work at the moment is in the corporate world, but as we move into education, it's also true that the domain, if you're teaching something, a topic, whether it be sales or improving clinical, reducing clinical error in healthcare, you have two languages in which the information is presented. You have a colloquial, everyday language, the one I'm communicating to you now in, and then you have a domain-specific language. So there'll be the acronyms and specialist words that we use within that domain. And so, within physics, you have the word standard, for example, doesn't mean the same as it does in everyday English. But then you look at the other language that we use in physics, because there's another language which is a mathematical notational dialect of symbols and numbers. And so students have to penetrate that as well. So not only are we presenting a huge new domain of knowledge to students in multiple different modes, we've also got different languages that they have to try and penetrate and try and understand. So it gets even more complex for them.
Yeah, and I think on this idea of complexity, this is a good moment to pause just for a message from our sponsors. When we come back, I'd like to talk to you about how sort of like social media and tech and devices adds that complexity to kids retaining and building on foundational knowledge. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Remember that feeling when you wanted to upgrade your learning spaces, but the budget said, maybe next year? Here's what most people don't know. ODP Business Solutions doesn't just offer competitive pricing. We give you access to negotiated cooperative contracts that maximize every dollar. Want proof? We helped the Baldwin School District transform their entire campus while staying under budget. How? By combining smart design with smarter purchasing. From essential supplies to cutting-edge tech, from sustainable cleaning solutions to flexible furniture, we're your one-stop shop to do school different. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. That helps you simplify ordering and streamlining budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Too often, kids who love gaming don't see themselves as scientists or engineers. But what if play could open that door? That's what Play Piper is all about. Their hands-on STEM kits turn curiosity into confidence by connecting gaming and tinkering with real-world coding and engineering. Suddenly, students realize they are capable of discovery and innovation. For educators searching for ways to spark excitement and keep kids engaged in STEM, Piper is the bridge. Learn more at playpiper.com. That's playpiper.com to learn more. What makes an assessment effective? I would argue giving teachers access to quick, reliable, and useful results that inform the next best steps for teaching. And that's where IXL really stands out. Teachers get powerful insights into student performance on a daily basis so they can address issues the moment they arise. Imagine that, adjusting instruction in real time before it's too late. Your teachers have a tool that helps them be even more effective. And your students, they grow and they grow. Check it out for yourself at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and we're back with Simon Strong from Download Learning, and we're talking about how they have seen some results where students have yeah, experienced a half term of learning in 1 hour. And then I think I heard you say if they did that hour lesson plus the teaching support, they doubled their gains, if I understood you correctly.
That's right. So you can double student attainment. I think one of the interesting things we've had in our corporate work, and we haven't got a huge body of evidence for this, but working in the construction industry with young men who, broadly speaking, going into the construction industry are not people who took to the academic world vigorously. There tend to be a higher than average number of students with neurodiversity, with ADHD and dyslexia and those sorts of learning differences. And when we took a 5-day health and safety course that they delivered to those students, and we condensed it down into an hour, not only did we see that they achieve the same learning outcomes in that 1 hour as 5 days of health and safety training, which is
What a treat.
which they were very happy about. But one of the side effects that was reported back to us anecdotally from the college was that disruption in the classroom evaporated. And I think that's a really important signal about the way in which students are responding to some of the ways in which we're educating them, which is that my father, and sorry, slight tangent, my father got a report at school when he was young, the sort of report we can't give to students nowadays, but I think it's relevant to this, which is they said, David flounders in a sea of incomprehension, well beyond the reach of any life felt. And I think that's what we do. I think that's what we do to too many students. They flounder in this sea of incomprehension because the way we're presenting materials to them is overwhelming and they feel lost. And how do they catch up? How do they get back on board the boat?
Yeah. And that was official feedback from the school to the family?
It was extraordinary. He's got it somewhere. For years, I've tried to get it from him so I can frame it. I think I'll have to.
I would frame that. That would be framed on the wall, right? And taught through all the ancestors. So fantastic. Well, you also mentioned how our brains are sorting all the time, and you talked about like sitting down, or I feel the standing mat and, the heat. It's warm here as well. But then there's the other layer of social media and technology. And I'm just curious, like, if you feel like teachers even have a chance, right? With like so many distractions, so many things pulling students' attention away, and it takes 15 minutes at least to get back to where we're at. Like, what is there to do?
Yeah, I'm torn on this, and I need to be really clear. Your Ruckus Makers, all of your head teachers and principals, do an amazing job. And they sit in the front line. They work in schools, and I don't. I don't know that world. The only contact I've had with it was as a student, and some time ago now. So, but my sense is this might not be this may be a spicy opinion. I think one of the reasons that social media is having an impact is because kids are bored in the classroom. Because they're not learning, they're turning to something which is more interesting. When, I know with my kids, when we go on holiday and, we're traveling and it's a bit boring, yada, yada, they'll go on to go. But when we're doing stuff, they're more than happy to put it away and engage with what's happening in the outside world. Some of your Ruckus Makers will know there's a video, and if you haven't seen it, they can Google it, of a very simple attention exercise on YouTube that you can look at. And the exercise is where there are a team of 3 people in white T-shirts, a team 3 in black. Each team has a basketball, and you're asked to count the number of times the team in the white T-shirts pass the basketball over a period of 10 seconds or so. And you count. And at the end of which it says, well done, you counted 19 passes. But did you spot the gorilla?
Yeah. The big gorilla. Something of everyone. Like, just a massive gorilla. I've seen that video.
It rewinds, and there it is. It just walks right across, and you never see it.
You never see it.
For me, that's a perfect metaphor for what we do in the classroom a lot of the time, which is we think we're showing them a gorilla, but they don't spot it. What they're looking at is the kid next to them, or they've got another question on their mind, or whatever else is happening. They cannot decode. They never spot the gorilla. And if they don't spot that, then the next set of questions or exercises become utterly pointless. They're lost. They're lost in a sea of incomprehension. And I think that's where social media then steps in.
The thing with social media too, like to your point, it's meeting everybody, whether it's a student or you and me. It's meeting us where we're at. It's the algorithm's trying to feed us stuff that we think, we'll find that interesting. And that's a sort of a constraint, maybe, for school teachers and the ones that just accept curriculum as is and is just going to teach it like this is the way we've always done it. They're probably going to struggle. But the one that thinks, how do I bridge this beautiful concept from antiquity into the modern, world? You can do that and hook kids in. So I've got two nephews, like seventh grade, freshmen in high school, right? Both are boys. And so you can imagine what they're like and tons of energy. And they love their devices, they love their device. I brought them out to an arcade the other day. And as we were just having dinner, I said, can I tell you guys a story? Right. And Levi and Silas said, yeah. So I'll break into the story. It starts like this. I'm in the kitchen of an Airbnb in Casablanca, Morocco, that my wife and I have rented. I'm waiting for the coffee to brew. Miriam is downstairs taking a shower. I hear a knock at the door. I open the door. There's a man who looks incredibly upset at me, right? And he starts shouting at me in Arabic, words that I cannot understand. Then he hands me a letter that I obviously cannot read, turns on his heels and disappears down the stairwell. I close the door and my wife screams. And then the story continues, right? I'm gonna leave it there as a cliffhanger. But it's about it. It goes anywhere between, like, I can do it in 6. If I add some details and some funny parts, it's about a 10 to 12-minute story. And both my nephews, who love their phones and, at times, like, they're always on devices, no, not a device out, glued in like you were with me, like, what's going to happen? They were laughing and, like, I couldn't believe it, right? And just the power of story as well. I don't know. It probably helps that I was, the uncle and that kind of thing. But either way, like, they're young people and they were right there with me. So based on your expertise and all of that kind of stuff, I don't know if you could make a connection.
I think one of the things the last week or so I've been thinking about this quite a lot around the way in which we design learning experiences, whether it's in the school or in the corporate world. We sort of do needs analysis and then, how do we ensure learning transfer, blah, blah, blah. And that's not the approach that's sat in my head. I come from very much more organizational transformation perspective, a behavioral perspective. And there are models now for behavior change, like COM-B, for example. I don't know if you've come across that. It's a very well-respected model, COM-B. The B stands for the behavior. And the model suggests that behavior, the desired outcome, is produced by a combination of capability, opportunity, and motivation. So the capability is the bit that we very much focus on in the learning environment of a school, for example, which is the doing of. The opportunity is, do they ever get to actually apply this stuff? The kids get, we teach them physics. Do they ever become physicists? We teach them history, but do they ever are they historians? Do they do the history, etc.? And then the final bit is the motivation. What are the incentives? What are the rewards they get, and the barriers to exhibiting that behavior? And I wonder whether a COM-B model or a behavioral model would be much more successful. So how much of students' reluctance to engage with classroom is due to learning transfer, et cetera, and more to do with the behavioral thing, which is, are you giving them the opportunity to apply those lessons? Have they got the motivation and the rewards, the incentive structures in place to demonstrate the competency?
Yeah, fascinating. Well, the last note I have, at least according to your work, I think your video, if I remember correctly, sped up the words per minute a little, not crazy, but it certainly wasn't like the normal sort of cadence that you and I have right now speaking. So why, if I have that accurate, why does that matter?
So the first learning input that we present to students tends to be quite, I'm going to use the word alarming. It's not probably the right word, but I'll use it anyway. And hopefully your audience will fill in the correct word for me. For teachers and for traditional educators, because the pace of it is much, much faster than they're used to. So a traditional e-learning voiceover and probably the speed of teaching in the classroom will probably be around 120 words per minute. Something like the pace that I'm using now to speak to you, which is quite slow and for many students, really, really annoying. For us, we go at 220 words per minute, which is much quicker. And because we've scripted it and edited out any extraneous information, any extraneous words, any words which are not simple and easily understandable, then students are able to comprehend it. And because we are not looking for students to understand the topic straight off, but rather to fire synapses, we're able to do that. And a lot of your audience will be familiar with this in that people now listen to podcasts and watch YouTube videos on double time, 1.5, 1.5, 2 times speed. And because it's easier to listen to, they can take more out of it. And what you're doing is skimming over. It's like speed reading. You're skimming over the topic to get a macro view of the topic rather than the minutiae of each individual word. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're doing. So we're almost fire hosing the student. And especially for students with attention difficulties, it forces them to lean in. It means that they're having to put their full attention on the materials that we're presenting to them, which improves their ability to hold and take in that information. It stops them from their minds from drifting.
You said something there, actually, I want to ask you about before I get to the last 3 questions I asked all my guests. You said simple language. Richard Feynman, physicist, right? Popular in the US. He had what he called the Feynman technique, which is you don't understand a concept unless you could explain it to like a 12-year-old, right? And essentially, we were nerding out about like sort of marketing and advertising, that kind of stuff on our pre-call the other day. But the most effective campaigns, they use simple language, right? Like when I write stuff, I actually plug it in an app. Now I'm really I've got it internalized, but there's an app called the Hemingway app after Ernest Hemingway, who used very concise, simple language. And my goal, like literally, I try to go between a 2nd to 8th grade reading level when I'm putting content out for leaders I care about, Ruckus Makers. And the connection here is there's a lot of teachers, at least stateside, that have big fat heads, puffed out chests, and the reputation and ego that you learn about before you even meet the individual. And they love to sound smart, but sounding smart and being effective as an educator or communicator is not the same thing. So do you want to riff on simple language and why that matters, and then we'll close this down.
I think there are two. Yeah, I could. Well, we could do a whole other podcast just on that. I think there are 2 aspects to it. One is, you're absolutely right. The complexity of language that we present students with becomes a barrier to comprehension rather than an aid. And it's not big words, it's new concepts. And often when we get into a domain, we have this really specialized language, which is really nuanced and precise. But students who are encountering a novel domain of information don't need that precision. They need big picture. They need big brushstrokes to understand the picture of what they're trying to grasp. And so that high-level language doesn't help them in the learning process. Once they enter into the domain and they've got a picture of what's going on, then they want to pick up that, because that's about the precision that you get and mastery over that topic. But you can only gain that mastery once you've got a handle on it, that schema that enables you to engage with it. The other aspect, and I think this goes back to my, so we haven't mentioned this yet, but I come from an advertising background. I worked at Saatchi and Bates and 141, working on Guinness and campaigns globally and all this sort of stuff. And the difference between an ad agency and a teacher, or an academic, I should be clearer, rather than a teacher, is that for an academic, they'll have an idea and then they'll write a book on it. So they'll take their idea and they'll expand it into a book. And they'll go into a lecture theatre and they'll take the idea that they've got and they'll expand on it. For an ad agency, we come at it from the other perspective, which is we'll take a company and we'll reduce it down into a 3-word strapline and a 30-second ad. And that approach is much more successful at engaging people and getting them to change their behavior and lodging that information into their brains than the opposite. Once they've got that information, then they might want to read your book and expand on it.
Yeah.
But we've got to simplify it down first for them.
Yeah. It's that foundational concept, the elevator pitch, so to speak, the hook. That's why I talk about Ruckus Makers do school different. People either look curious and they well, tell me what that's about, right? And then I could go into a longer riff. And if they stick with me after a little bit longer riff, right, then we can go even deeper. But the interesting thing about that phrase, Ruckus Makers do school different, after I go through the riff, not everybody becomes, a client or wants to hire me as a speaker, coach, or whatever. But Simon, 100% of everybody so far, and I've been testing this for years, they say I am or I am not a ruckus maker. So 100% of people have accepted how I've named, framed, and claimed the point of view, in education. Everybody's not with me. They're not all aligned, but they accept the point of view. And so I think that's kind of like, what we're talking about as well. Cool. So I think if I have the website right, downloadlearning.co.uk, is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Sweet. So yeah, Ruckus Makers, if you're excited about, half a term gains in 1 hour or doubling it with the hour of support plus excellent teaching, reach out to Simon here at downloadlearning.co.uk. So last 3 questions I have for all our guests. If you could put one message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message be?
Oh, that is a lovely question. So I'm a big rugby fan, and for your American,
Explain what that is.
it's like American football, but without the pads. And one of the great legends of the game, a guy called Paul O'Connell, who was the captain of Ireland and British and Irish Lions, and he's a massive man mountain, absolute legend. And I saw him being interviewed once, and the interviewer came up with that old cliche of sport, rugby builds character. I'm sure you'll have some sort of variation on that in the States. And he stopped them and he said, no, sport does not build character. It reveals character. And we all like to imagine that we're being heroic in the 80th minute of a game when we're tired and the referee gives a bad decision. But it turns out that we're bitter and resentful. We'd all like to think that we'd be heroic and generous winners, but we're not. And we discover that about ourselves only when we're put under duress. And I think that's true of education. So on my marquees around the world, I'd like to remind teachers and educators that education doesn't build character, it reveals it. I think it's our job to help students discover who they are and to become the best version of that person who they are, which is a unique contribution that they have to society.
That's a brilliant and well thought out answer. I thought maybe there was an opportunity you might come with so long and thanks for all the fish, but
well, before we this is going to be the 41st episode, and I was saying I was hoping it'd be the 42nd, and that way it'd be the answer to life, the universe, and everything from Douglas Adams. But
that's
yeah,
for sure. And check out Douglas Adams' work for sure. Have you ever read Discworld by any chance?
I haven't. I've read 1 or 2 of them, but when I was a kid. But I can't. Yeah, they're fabulous.
Yeah, I'm forgetting the author's name at the
Crackers.
Yeah, but I love his work too. Okay, Simon, if you were building a dream school and you didn't have any sort of limitations of resources, your only constraint was your ability to imagine, what would be the 3 guiding principles of your dream school?
Well, this comes straight. I do want to change schools. I'm not just a school, all schools. And this is the biggest problem we face. And so going back to my COM-B model, how do we change them? And I think it's about incentives. If you show me the incentives, someone once said, I'll show you the outcomes. And I think the incentives that we have in schools at the moment have created the schools that we've got, which are perfectly fitted and suited to deliver those outcomes. So the only way we're going to change schooling, in my view, is to change the incentive structures. And I want to expand them from knowledge, which is important but not sufficient. So my first principle is knowledge. But that's what we currently do. It's knowledge transfer. We test for knowledge and recall. But there are 2 other things that I want to incentivize schools on, which is to improve competence within students. The first is curiosity, which is the ability to ask questions. And when I was a student, asking difficult, awkward questions was actively discouraged, and we want to encourage it. I think it was Einstein who said that he imagined a witch on a beam of light riding away from Earth on her broomstick of light and looking back and imagining what Earth would look like. And that led to E equals MC squared. You know, a well-formulated question can drive an entire lifetime of meaningful endeavor. A good, well-formulated question can change the world. And sometimes they're whimsical, and sometimes they're profound, and sometimes they're simple. But it's a question that grabs people. And being able to ask a good question is, I think, quite a profound ability, even more so than maybe being able to answer it. So I think being able to measure for curiosity. And the other aspect is what I would describe as socialization, which is not just being able to connect person to person, although I think that's really, really important. And your storytelling example from earlier was you connecting with your nephews. But how often do students connect with one another in a classroom in a meaningful way? So that's socialization. But also from domain to domain, you know, that we connect history with music, with ethics, with coding. I mean, imagine a student who loves coding and is also interested in ethics, and maybe bring both of those together to look at a coding to help euthanasia, a moral question. How does it deal with that? Now, if they went to Target or Walmart for a job in their tech department, they'd easily be able to say, you are an amazing coder, but you just would not fit here. Your interests are not aligned with what we do. But if they went to Amnesty International, they would be absolutely the person that they're looking for. And we are often, you know, we don't live in silos of topics, but rather a range of interests and the socialization of those things. That's what makes us interesting. And I think that needs to be encouraged much more within the school environment. So those are my three things: curiosity, socialization, and knowledge.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll double click on the curiosity question part of that triad, because the other day I was having a wonderful conversation with another podcast guest. And we got to talking about, you know, what's school for and what they measure and that kind of thing. And that was, you know, one of the profound ideas I think we offered the listeners. So I want to reshare it here again is, you know, we're gonna evaluate and assess the regurgitation of facts and knowledge and this kind of stuff that already happens. And it's systemic, and I don't know, it's going to change. But what would it look like for a school to actually start evaluating, assessing students' ability to be curious and ask questions, right? And I think that's an interesting question just to noodle on, right? And a thread to pull on. Like, what if we became a campus that evaluated our kids by curiosity and questioning? How would that change everything? It would change everything, you know? So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. So we covered a lot of ground, had a lot of fun, shared a few laughs. Of everything we discussed, Simon, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
Oh my goodness, that should be an easy one for me, given it's all about long-term memory. But I think you may not be aware of this lady. There's a lady, very famous lady, who ran a program in the north of London, which helped deprived kids, and she was called Camilla Batmangali. She was a very flamboyant lady, wore these amazing African turbans and flowing gowns. And in the south of London, there was another guy called Ray Lewis who ran another program for deprived kids from socioeconomically deprived backgrounds. And an interviewer looked at both of them, and Camilla was all about the love, all about the compassion, very motherly. Ray, on the other hand, was very disciplined. It was all about being punctual, dressing up, being the man. And he compared and contrasted these, and he got them together and he said, which is better? Why are they so different? And Ray stopped him and he said, they're not different. We do exactly the same thing. We love those students. It's just that my love is different from Camilla's. I can't love in the way that she loves them, and she can't love in the way that I love them. And for me, I think ruckus makers need to know that not only are their students enough, but they are enough. It's about them being who they are in the classroom, not trying to be somebody else. And I think students will respond to that.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I enjoyed recording it. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something for you, where you want to do school different or you have a new idea about education, then I want to invite you to subscribe to ruckusmakers.news. That's our newsletter. And you get 3 new opportunities to do school different every week sent to your inbox. It's trusted by over 5,000 school leaders. And if you want to reimagine education within a traditional setting so that you could create a campus experience worth showing up for, subscribe for free at ruckusmakers.news.